If your doctor isn't asking questions about your diet, your environment, and other things, are they practicing medicine or are they just managing your decline? So I'm coming to this conclusion because the one question that modern medicine doesn't seem to ask is the most important question that I think modern medicine could be asking. And that is what environment did our body evolve to thrive in, right? So let me break this down a little bit. Modern medicine is very good. So I should just say, look, this is day 3. It's a 30-day live streaming challenge. On day 1, I talked about sort of the big disconnect, why we're sort of not that healthy. Yesterday, I began to talk a little bit more about the practical things we can do. And today, we're really diving deep into this notion of ecology, right? So the question is, why is medicine failing? Right? And I think we have to agree, looking at the statistics, that medicine absolutely is failing, right? There's no question about that. But the question is why? So I think we can say that if I were to break my hand today, or if I were to break my leg, or even if I were to have a heart attack, which is unlikely given my 0 calcium score, but even if I were, I would absolutely want the benefits of modern medicine, right? Modern medicine is very good at trauma care, at those kind of emergency operations and so on, but it is not so good at restoring health. It's not so good at optimizing health. Just imagine if you go to your doctor and you say, "Doctor, I'm feeling fine, but I would just like to know what it takes to optimize my health. Like I'm okay. I'm at like an 8 out of 10, but how do I get to a 9 out of 10 on health?" What will your doctor say? Will your doctor have any idea? Will they be like, maybe you could take a vitamin or something? But would it be anything more than an educated guess? So modern medicine treats the human body like a machine with broken parts, right? So it's like a car. Until there's something wrong with your car, you don't take it for servicing, right? But chronic illness, what we have to understand is some of these things happen so slowly that it's really hard to measure. It's not like, okay, one day my arm was working fine, the next day it's broken. That's very clearly a problem, right? But when we're talking about, in my own case, it was asthma, it was loss of night vision, it was achy joints, it was all these little symptoms that none of which on its own was enough for me to go to the doctor, but all of which together signaled a kind of ecological collapse, right? And here I can talk about one of my clients, Angela. She had labs that were kind of okay, but she was clearly suffering from some issues. She was so anxious, she hadn't really left her house in years. And just by looking at her face and some of her other things, she was suffering from inflammation. She was a little bit more tired than we would have liked. Why? Because the environment that she was living in was so disconnected from the environment that humans evolved to live in, right? Her diet was too low in protein. Her lifestyle was too stressful for a variety of reasons. She was, like a lot of us, she was looking at screens a lot of the time, right? And she was surrounded by artificial lights and not sunlight, right? So what we can understand now, a lot of people will look at those symptoms, and Angie wasn't young. I can't remember how old she was when I worked with her, but she was at least in her late 50s, let's say. So some people will say, look, it's just bad luck, it's genetics. And what we have to understand is that genetics are all about you. So my genes are set, they're set at birth. The genes may predispose me to some bad outcome. They may predispose me to cancer or heart attacks and so on. But what we're understanding as we get deeper and deeper into the science is that it's not so much about genetics, right? It's about epigenetics. Epigenetics means the science of what sits above the genome, above the gene, and it's about which genes get turned on and off. In other words, it's all about the environment, not it's all about the ecology, rather. It's not about the genes, right? So with this in mind, we have to ask ourselves what it means to actually begin to think in ecological terms, right? So the body evolved under sunlight with some degree of scarcity, definitely movement, and definitely kinship. It was all about social structures. It was all about clans and so on. It was all about society. So we compare that's a human living 100,000 years ago. You compare that with a human living today who's surrounded by artificial lights. They can basically get food with great ease just by walking to a fridge or tapping a button on an app or whatever. And often they're very isolated. We may feel like our phones and our social media and all these things keep us connected, but it doesn't, right? And I think many of us are beginning to understand that too. So you change that. So we've taken away the light environment, we've taken away the food environment, we've taken away the social environment. how on earth do we expect a human to thrive, given that we've taken away everything that seems to make humans thrive, right? So what I want you to understand is that what we call disease states, often they are not disease states. They are what happens. They are an adaptation. The body is trying to survive, given that we've taken the body out of the ecosystem that actually it's meant to thrive in, and we put it in a very unlivable, I almost want to use that term, we put it in an unlivable ecosystem. So in that context, when we see things like hardening of the arteries, when we see things like cancers develop even, when we see things like the beta amyloid plaques that are associated with Alzheimer's disease and so on, those maybe, I mean, one theory is that those are coping mechanisms. Those are our body trying to help us to live longer. Certainly our body's not trying to kill us, it's trying to stay alive. So the body's trying to say, keep us going as long as we can, but sometimes the solution is just as bad as the cure, right? And so if we fix those symptoms, I mean, you can see this with the Alzheimer's research on the beta amyloid discussions and so on. Often you're fixing the symptoms and you're without fixing the inputs, without fixing the entire environment, right? And that's like putting paint over mold. Like it'll work for a little while, but eventually the mold is going to come back, and it's going to come back with a vengeance, right? So in the case of Angela, she went back to a nutrient-dense, ancestrally appropriate food routine and simple daily rhythms. Try and get her, she happened to live, I think, in a very sunny climate and by the beach. So try and get her on the beach as much as she could. And all her symptoms and her anxiety disappeared, right? So then the question becomes, okay, how do we fix all this, right? And here I want to talk about the difference between fads, not just fad diets, but fads in general, right? You would have seen apple cider vinegar as a fad. You would have seen like powdered beetroot as like a nitric oxide fix. You would have seen all these pills. Vitamin D was big at a certain point. I think it's still kind of big in some circles. And that's fine. Those have their place. We can use those, from time to time in specific individuals. But what you really want to do to heal is to remove the friction between the biology and your life. What do I mean by that? I mean, your body has evolved over thousands of years, millions of years, many millions of years, to be honest, for a certain lifestyle, and you're not living it. Now, I'm not living it either. None of us are, right? So how do we do that? So there are some levers you can pull, right? So you can eat like a human. Humans evolved to be hypercarnivorous, as we've discussed elsewhere. That means 70% of your food should be coming from meat or from animal products more generally. Eggs may be fine too. Dairy is okay for some people. For some people, we avoid it, right? If you're going to eat plant foods, then you want to make sure that A, they're seasonal at the very least, B, they're minimally processed, and C, the extent that processing is done, we want that processing to be about detoxification, right? So if you're going to have bread, this is not what I advise, but if you choose to have bread, then it would be good to have a fermented kind of bread, right? A sourdough or whatever that might minimize the toxins, might pre-digest the sugar and minimize the damage to your body. The same with foods that I do eat, which are things like kimchi and sauerkraut. Those are lacto-fermented. They're fermented over a long period of time using a process that has been around for a long time, for 1,000 years or more. The process of lacto-fermentation is kind of a pre-digestion of those plant materials that otherwise we can't really get much nutrients out of. In fact, I'm not sure we can get much nutrients out of it even after that, but at least it's going to do less harm if it's pre-digested, right? So that's point number one, eat like a human. Point number two, how can we adjust our patterns a little bit to be a little bit better with the daylight cycles and so on, right? And really get sunlight. So getting up around the time that the sun rises is going to help you. Being conscious of when the sun sets and trying to get out of artificial light environments, trying to certainly put the phone away when the sun sets. These are the minimum things we can do. And then, you think about how much our ancestors would have had to move, right? So it's about movement, it's about deep breath, and it's about social connection. What are the relationships you want to value in your life? And how are you going to actually spend physical time with those people as much as possible, right? And then the last thing I'll say just in terms of the levers is, the biggest lever is you. You have a head, you have a heart, you have a gut, right? And somewhere between those three things is your intuition, or involved in all of them, right? And if you're feeling that something's off, but all of your labs are coming in range, don't trust your intuition. Don't trust your lab ranges. And likewise, the other way around. Like if you're feeling fine, but something's out of range, well, maybe double check it and make sure that maybe talk with someone who's familiar with your particular physiology and so on. Or if you're on a low carb diet, talk with someone like me who's actually worked with lots of low carb people and we know what ranges are important and what aren't. And then only, don't treat blood work, treat symptoms, right? Your body is not broken, your environment is, and you can change that environment one lever at a time, right? Now, if this makes sense to you, even just feels true, I want to invite you to my free webinar. I'll walk you through how clients like Angela are reversing heart disease, anxiety, and autoimmunity, not with their medicines, although sometimes people do use medicines, but with ecology, with logic, and with ancestral intelligence, with first principles, right? So you can just go to my website, samirdasani.net/webinar. It's free, and it might change your life. Thanks so much, and I will see you in the next one. Garuda Legend says hello. Hi, Garuda Legends. Good to see you here. Yeah, thanks so much, and I will see everyone in the next one.